Good evening, everybody, and a warm welcome to tonight's webinar. My name is Simon Holden. You'll know me from Betfan, and it's a great pleasure tonight to welcome you to our second webinar. And tonight we're going to enter the world of race ratings, and we have one of the best guys in the business, who is Michael Wilding. You may know him from his excellent Monday columns in Betfan newsletter. And I'm really thrilled that Michael can join us tonight. Now, hopefully you've got a pen and paper to hand. If not, maybe make a quick grab, because there's going to be lots of info coming over in tonight's broadcast, and it might be an idea to make some notes. And at the end, Michael's got a very special announcement, and I've had some sort of word of what it is, and you really want to hear what he's got to say, because it's an announcement of something that's been a lot of work in progress, and it's a very, very special announcement. So you're going to want to hear that at the end. But until then, if you have any questions during the webinar, please pop them in the question box, and we've got some people helping us who are going to try and answer them. What I'll be doing is I'll be collating all the questions, and at the very end of the presentation, I'll be putting some of them, as many as I can, to Michael. So if there's anything that you want clarification of, get the question in the box, which will be on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll endeavour to get them through. So hopefully everyone's ready, and it's a great pleasure tonight to welcome Michael. So, Michael, are you there?
Hi, Simon. Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. How are you, Michael?
Very well, thank you. And yourself?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Thank you, very good. Yeah, really looking forward to tonight, and I'm sure you've got lots of information for us. So if
Absolutely.
everyone has got pen and paper and is ready to get some questions, we'll have a little chat at the end, Michael, and I'll be throwing you as many questions as I can, but I'm sure you'll be ready for them.
Absolutely. Perfect. I will look forward to it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Okay, so as Simon said, I suggest strongly that you grab a pen or pencil and paper to make notes as we go through this evening. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really looking forward to this evening. So thank you, first of all, for joining me today. And for those of you who don't know me, this is me. You can see me there in a delightful screenshot on the left-hand side. And during this evening, I've got a load of things to share with you, but I'm going to share with you, first of all, why I know about horse racings. I mean, how did I come to know all about horse race ratings? We're going to look at the benefits of using race ratings, the 5 factors that you absolutely must have if you're going to use race ratings, and why you should be rating them. And then I'm going to build a rating with you this evening that you can actually take away and start using on tomorrow's races immediately. So you're going to be able to take this away with you at the end of this evening and start getting to grips with it and using it. And then at the end, I'm going to share something with you that I have never actually shared before. So I'm really excited about that, and I'm looking forward to it. Okay, so let's get started. Now, I first started betting on horses when I was 18, or maybe a little bit younger, but obviously officially 18. And like most people, I made a loss. And I eventually managed to find my edge through playing poker. Because by playing poker, I learned that if I wanted to make a profit, then I had to know absolutely everything there was to know about the game. And for those of you who play poker or have played poker, you know that you need to know everything. You need to know what kind of outs you've got, what the blinds are doing, and of course all the other various mathematics involved in the game if you're going to make any profit from it. So it taught me that to make profit, you have to know as much as possible about the game that you're playing. But at the end of the day, if I had to choose between cards and horse racing, well, to be honest, I was only really left with one choice, and that was horse racing, because I much, much preferred horse racing. So what I did was I started to learn absolutely everything I could find out about horse racing, but I did one thing differently to the majority of people. While I was learning, I didn't place a single bet. And that actually had a side effect which massively benefited me for the future, because what it did is it taught me a discipline with my betting that I had never had before. The discipline of spending all this time self-educating myself on the sport without actually betting gave me a discipline and allowed me to detach myself slightly from the emotions of betting, which I'd never been able to do. And of course, when I went back and started betting again, I began to actually make profits. And for a long time, I was a profitable punter using a form reading approach. And this is the approach that you probably see most people using. It's you look at the paper or the racing post online, and you see the form lines, and you see what the horses have done before, and you kind of analyze the race. I used to write it down. I know some people do it in their heads. So everyone has their own different methods, but essentially you're going through the race cards every day. And I actually call this now, I call it a manual approach to race betting. And for a long time I was profitable using this manual approach. And then I had a meeting in the States. It was a chance meeting with someone who turned out to be one of the leading artificial intelligence programmers for US betting syndicates. And talking to him and becoming friends with him totally revolutionized my approach to betting, because all betting syndicates use something that is known as database handicapping. And what this means is that they use lots of ratings and lots and lots of ratings in order to create very accurate odds lines. And then they take these odds lines and compare them with the live markets to find value. And obviously they then bet on that value. And these betting syndicates, this is big business in the States. They dictate the betting markets out there. But what appealed to me particularly about this approach was that on the day of racing, it was completely hands-free. And when I say hands-free, I mean completely hands-free. So excuse the slightly cheesy picture here, but I'm not often close to a computer during the racing day, but I am still betting. So, I mean, you could be somewhere like in this picture, you could be sitting anywhere on a bench. And the beauty of using database handicapping is that you don't have to be in front of the computer while the day's racing is taking place. And obviously, this isn't magic. It's because all of the work is done in the weeks and the months before a race ever takes place. So, what we do in these weeks and months before a race takes place is we make our ratings, and then we develop our selection process, and then on the day of racing, it only takes a matter of seconds for the computer to go out and use our ratings and our selection processes that we've developed and find the selections for the day. And of course, you could either bet those manually, or you can even plug those into an automated bot, which then bets them for you. So that would make it completely hands-free. If you're betting them manually, then obviously you're going to have to be there in the morning to place your bets. Now, I thought that because I was already a profitable hunter, then it would possibly take me a year to, I don't know, learn how to build the ratings, and then build a database to store these ratings in, and then create an accurate selection process, make a profitable and fully automated betting model. So I thought that it would take me roughly about a year to do all these things, because after all, I was making profits anyway. It was just about automating what I was already doing. Well, you can probably imagine I was wrong. I was actually very wrong. It took me 1 year just to build my first database. And then it took me another 2 years before I had my first profitable betting model. And I'm actually still using that model as part of my portfolio today. So it was a good model, but it took a lot longer than I expected. However, of course, there were some good things that came out of this, and probably the best thing that came out of it was that during this time, I learned a huge amount about developing horse racing ratings, and how to find the ones that were going to work, and in what situations they would work in, and then how to, of course, use them to make profits. And that's the knowledge that I want to share with you this evening in this webinar. Okay, so let's move on and let's start looking at ratings. So the first question we need to ask is will using ratings to find winners suit you? I mean, it doesn't necessarily suit everybody. So, we want to know if it's going to suit you. And in order to get an idea of whether this is likely to be the case, we need to ask ourselves a few questions. So the first question is, do you like to bet on horses' names or real information? So, do you actually like to have solid information on which to base your betting? Or do you prefer to kind of go with your emotion and, see how it goes? Would you rather spend some time building a rating in order to find selections in just a few minutes each day, rather than spending hours every single day analysing races by hand? Would you prefer to place your bets in the morning and then not have to think about it again? Because, of course, one of the difficulties of placing your bets throughout the day is you get involved in the races, and that actually makes it very hard to distance yourself from your betting in terms of a business, in terms of making profits from your betting as a business. Well, if you said yes to any of those questions, then you're almost certainly going to want to be using your own ratings, because that is what they do. The ratings are there to make it easier for us when we're betting. Now, when you use a rating, what you're looking for is a rating that most punters don't have access to. Okay? We don't want the majority of people who are betting to have access to the ratings that we're using. So if you think of a rating like top speed, obviously the vast majority of the betting public are going to consider that in some way in their betting, because it's in the Racing Post. So we want ratings that most punters don't have access to, and that allows us to find signs of a good selections that the majority of people are missing. Okay, so that's quite an important part of developing a rating and using ratings. Okay, so before we get into ratings, I want to look at how a rating and how using ratings may affect your profits. Because betting using ratings is different to betting using a manual form reading approach. And to put it quite bluntly, it's going to make your profits bigger. Ultimately, it will make them bigger. And that's because it uses a turnover approach rather than a higher return on investment. But we'll get into that later. Okay, so the reason it's going to make them bigger is because although generally speaking the return on investment when using a rating to find selections is going to be lower, what you can do is rate 10 times as many races each day, because it only takes you a few minutes to find your selections. And so this is what I mean by turnover. We're rating 10 times and we're finding 10 times as many possible selections each day because the ratings are freeing up so much time from our manual handicapping. Now, let's look at a quick example of what I mean by this. If we had 60 selections a month at 20% return on investment, and this is something that a traditional form reader using a manual handicapping approach may achieve. Sometimes they could have far less selections than this each month. Then we're going to be making a 12-unit flat bet profit at the end of the month on average. Okay, so 60 selections a month at 20% return is going to be an average of 12 units profit a month. Now let's look at a ratings better. A ratings better may have 200 selections a month, but they're only making a 10% return on investment. However, because we have 200 selections, we're making 20 units profit. We're making nearly double the amount of a profit as a manual form reader, and we're doing that with a 10% return on investment. So what we're doing is we're making more money because it doesn't take us very long to find the selections on the day of racing. We're utilizing our time properly. Okay, so now we've looked at that, let's jump in and start looking at how we create ratings. So I want to give you an overview of the rating betting model, if you were. How we use ratings kind of as an overview to find selections. Okay, so first of all, we need factors. And you can see some of these factors up here on the top of your screen. Now, these shapes are just indicating different factors. Each shape is a different factor, and there's 12 of them here, which is quite a lot. But we can actually have even more than that. We can have more raw factors than that, but also we can take into account the rankings of factors and also the difference from the top rated. So what is the ranking? So the ranking of a factor is the top rated horse would be ranked number 1, the second top rated horse would be ranked number 2, etc., etc., as you go down. And the difference from top rated would be if our top rated horse has 100 points and our second top rated horse has 90 points, then the difference from top rated for the second horse would be 10 points. So that's how the difference from top rated works. And in some situations, the difference from top rated is more effective than just the raw rating. And again, in some situations, rankings is more effective than the raw rating. In fact, and here's a little tip for you, quite often, especially when you're first starting with ratings, you should only consider rankings because they're much easier to get into, much easier to start making a profit from and building a betting system from than raw ratings. However, raw ratings can be very powerful when used properly. Okay, so we've got our factors, and these factors go into what we call a racing model. Oh, pardon me, sorry. So these factors go into what we call a racing model. And again, we don't have to have a single racing model, because what this racing model does is it decides which of the factors we should be using for a specific set of race conditions. So we could actually have more than one racing model for different race conditions. We may have a racing model for all-weather sprints and one for long-distance jumps, and yeah, you can have a ton of different racing models if you want. And in fact, the more specific each one is, the more profitable you're likely to be, and more importantly, the quicker you're likely to find profits by being specific. So the racing model is how we decide which factors we're going to use for the set of race conditions we're focusing on. And then this racing model goes into the selection process. So the racing model, we take the factors that it's chosen for the race conditions we're using, and we put them into the selection process that we've developed. And yet again, we can have more than one selection process. We can have a process for finding high strike rate backs, outsider backs, lays, Dutch bets, exotic bets. We can have a whole range of different selection processes for each racing model. And they are cross-compatible. You could take a selection process for one set of race conditions, one racing model, and use the same process on another racing model, so that they work across each other like that. Now, today, this evening, we're going to be focusing on one specific element of this picture, and we're going to be looking at the factors. Okay, now I call them factors. Factors is the same as ratings. It's actually an American term, unfortunately, but I've got used to using it because I was working with guys in the States, and when I first started database handicapping, I was most of my betting was done in the States, so I got used to calling them factors instead of ratings, but it's exactly the same thing. Now, we can group these factors into 5 main groups. Okay. Now, the 5 main groups that we really should be rating every horse for in a race is class, the current form, the speed, the horse's preferences to the conditions of the race that day, and of course the horse's connections. So in order to work out how we should be rating these, the first thing we want to do is look at how is the public, so how is the majority of the betting public assessing each of these 5 main groups? Because once we know how the general public is assessing each of these 5 main groups, then we can start to see different ways of rating them, ways that they're not looking at. And that's where we're going to find our edge. We're going to find our edge by doing things that the majority of people aren't doing. Okay, so if we look at class, then most people are going to be using the official class rating and nothing else. And personally, I don't believe the official class rating to be of a huge amount of value. It's not hugely informative. So if we can measure class in a different way, then we're going to be looking at that differently to the majority of the betting public. The current form, most people are going to be using the finish position of a horse in their last race, last time out, or the RPR rating, because that's the rating that is in the main or the only newspaper, racing newspaper in the UK, the only serious one. So that's where the general betting public are going to be going for their form. Now, speed isn't used as much as it should be in the UK, but when it is used, it is normally used as the top speed rating in the Racing Post, TS, or some kind of time form rating. Preferences to the conditions isn't really looked at by the majority of punters. Okay, it's just something that takes too long for most people to bother considering. But actually, it's very, very important. And then connections. Again, most people are going to be thinking about hot trainers, hot jockeys, and this is usually based on the last couple of weeks' performances. So it's a pretty small snapshot of what the connections are actually doing. So out of these 5 main groups, We haven't got time to create a rating for all of them this evening, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the current form and we're going to make a rating to measure it effectively right now. Okay, so what I'm going to show you, you're going to be able to do on any race from now on. So make sure you've got pen and paper handy. You're going to want to take notes on this as we go along. And I'm going to show you not just the rating, but I'm going to show you the whole process of creating this rating. Okay, so we start by assigning points to finish positions. So we have finish positions 1 through 5. Okay, now if a horse has come worse than 5, then it's not really being competitive, and we don't really need to bother rating it. And then we're going to assign points to them. So a horse finished first is going to get 12 points. A horse finished second will get 9 points. A horse finished third will get 6 points. A horse finished fourth will get 3 points. And a horse finished fifth will get 1 point. Now, we're going to do this for the last 3 finish positions, or you could do it for the last 6 finish positions, or in fact, you could go all the way back and do it for a horse's entire racing career, assigning points based on where it finished. If a horse finished worse than 5, then it gets no points in that race. And when you've finished assigning points to finish positions, each of the finish positions for a horse, you then add them all together to get the final rating. Now, you've probably seen something like this before, okay? But we're going to take this another step further. And I want to ask you a question now. Do you think that a race run 700 days ago is as relevant as a race run 14 days ago? Just think about that. If we're assigning points to horses based on their finish positions, is it sensible to assign the same points to a race that was run 700 days ago as a race run 14 days ago? Well, of course it's not. And I'm sure that's what you thought, and you would be absolutely right. So if we want to make our rating more accurate, then we're going to need to take this into account. We quite simply, we need to take into account how long ago the race we're assigning points to took place. And we're going to do that by using something that is known as time decay weighting. Okay? Now, don't worry about the fancy name. That's just something that it's called. You don't have to use the fancy name. It simply means that we make the most recent races a horse has been in more important than the races it was in longer ago. Okay, that's all it means. So recent races are more important. Races that happened longer ago are less important. And of course, the big question that we're going to be asking ourselves is, how do we adjust this rating to take account of the time? And the way we do it is we're going to use a percentage of the rating. So the further ago a race took place, then the smaller percentage of the rating we use. So it's a very simple process. It's nothing complicated or difficult to do. It can be done with a pencil and paper. And I'm even going to give you the percentages to use, okay? Because I know that this is something that worries people. Well, what percentage do I use? Well, you don't have to worry about that because I'm going to give you that right now. So the percentages we're going to use are 100% of the rating if the race was in the last 14 to 30 days, 61% of the rating if the race was in the last 30 to 60 days, 37% of the rating if the race was in the last 60 to 90 days, 22% of the rating if the race was in the last 90 to 120 days, and 13% of the rating if the race was in the last 120 days or longer. So that's what you should be using. And I want to clarify this for you. I want to make sure that it's clear and you understand it. So we're going to take a look at an example. Okay, right. So let's imagine that horse A and horse B are two horses in a race that we want to rate. So we want to know how good these horses are against each other. And we're just doing this simply based on their last race. Okay, so they've both finished first in their last race. But horse A finished first in a race that was 14 days ago, and horse B finished first in a race that was 90 days ago. So don't forget, these are our percentages that we're going to use based on how far ago a race was. Okay. Now, a first place position, if you remember, hopefully you got it written down on a notepad in front of you. So a first place position gets 12 points. So horse A finished first 14 days ago. And if we look at our percentages to use, we're using 100%. 14 to 30 days ago, we use 100% of the rating. So horse A gets 100% of the 12-point rating. And that means that horse A gets a total of 12 points. Then horse B finished his race 90 days ago and came first as well. So he's getting the same 12 points. But if we go and we look at our percentages, we see that 90 days ago, we only assigned 37% of the rating. So horse B only gets 37% of those 12 points, which means its total is 4.5 points. Okay, now just take a quick look at that and make sure that that's clear, okay? Because by doing that, by just using this simple rating that we've created so far, we assign points to a horse's finish position, and then if we determine what percentage of those points we use based on how long ago each of a horse's races were. And then, of course, we'll add up all the points a horse has got at the end. And by doing that, you are now rating form better than a large amount of punters out there. Okay, so you're already now ahead of a majority of bettors in the bookies because you're rating form in a much more logical and methodical process than they are doing. But of course, we can actually make it better still. Okay, so I want to ask you another question. And this question is, should a horse who won by half a length be rated the same as a horse that won by 5 lengths? Well, of course the answer is no. I mean, absolutely not. And I want to show you why. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to take a look at an example. Now, on the bottom half of your screen, you'll see we have our winning horse. It's won here. Its nose has crossed the finish line. And in this race, the second place horse is coming along on the top half of the screen, and it's quite close. It is kind of about a head away. Okay, so it ran a good race, and it was nearly up there with the winner. Okay, so the winner had a little bit of a battle on his hands there. Now let's reset this race. Okay, and here comes our winner again, and exactly the same as before, this horse won the race. But now it's in a race, and the horse that came second came way behind it. You can see there's a big difference here. And when we look at it like this, we can see that it's really silly to rate this winning horse the same in both races, because clearly in the second race it performed much better than in the first race because it won by a much bigger distance. So if it won by a bigger distance, it clearly performed better. So we don't want to rate the horses the same. So we don't. We don't rate them the same. What we do is, instead of giving points based on finish positions, we give the points based on the distance behind the winner. So let me show you what I mean by that. Okay. Now, the distance behind the winner, we may break them down like this, and again, I suggest you write this down. We may break them down in these groupings. So 0 to half a length behind the winner. Obviously, the horse that is 0 lengths behind the winner is the winner. Then we have half a length to 1 length behind the winner. 1 length to 1 3/4 lengths behind the winner. 1 3/4 lengths to 2 1/2 lengths behind the winner. And then 2 1/2 lengths to 4 lengths behind the winner. Okay, so that's how we break down our distances behind the winner. And then what we do is we assign our points in exactly the same way as before. It's just now we're crediting a horse based on how close it came to the winner instead of just a finish position. So that means that a horse could come second, but only be half a length behind the winner and still get 12 points because it raced very competitively in that race. So doing this has once again made our rating even more accurate. Okay, and we can actually take this to the next level again. Okay, and we're gonna max this rating out. We're gonna take it another stage further, and we're gonna do that by asking the question: what about the level of competition in the race? Okay, so if a horse is racing with better runners, then finishing 3 lengths behind the winner should get a better rating than finishing 3 lengths behind the winner in a race with worse runners. Okay, now let's take another look at that. I want to make sure that's clear. Okay, so if a horse is racing against better runners, we should give its rating a boost because it's racing against horses that are better than it. And if a horse is racing against worse runners, then we should give its rating a penalty because it's racing against horses that are worse than it. Okay, so we should be taking this into account as well. Yeah, this is very important. So how do we do that? Well, imagine that this is our runner in today's race, okay? And we've already rated this runner. So we've already looked at this horse's previous races, assigned the points to each of its last races, and then added them together, okay? So we've got the rating for this horse. Now, in this horse's last race, it's going to have raced against other horses. Okay. Now, I'm showing here 5 horses as an example. Of course, it could be 7, 10, 12, however many. But it's going to have raced against other runners, of course, in its last race. And we can rate, or we have rated, each of these runners as well, because we looked at these runners in that race. Okay. So each of these runners had a rating. Now, imagine if we took the average of each of those horses' runners' ratings in the last race. So we took each of those 5 horses in the last race, we took each of their ratings and averaged them together. We're going to get a race rating. Okay, and for example, this average rating in this race may be 35. Okay, now we don't have to stop at the last race for the horse. We could, of course, do the same for the second to last race, and if we did that, we may get a rating of 50. And again, we can do that for the third last race, and we may get a rating of 79. And you can keep doing this for obviously as many of a horse's previous races as you want. So what we're doing is for each of these races, we're creating a race rating. And this race rating is based on the average rating of all the runners in the race. Okay. Now, if we take a look at the average ratings for our horse's last 3 races, then we had 35, 50, and 79. Okay. And now let's take a look at the distance behind the winner our horse was in each of those races. So in its last race, it was 0 lengths behind the winner. In the second to last race, it was 2 lengths behind the winner. And in the third to last race, it was 4 lengths behind the winner. Now, using the same rating that we've already rated the horses for, we're not doing anything extra here. We've already rated these horses, okay? So using this same rating, we now know that this horse is likely to be competitive in a race that has an average rating of 50 or less. So that's immediately given us this hugely useful piece of information. And we've now used our rating to decide if the horse has got a chance of winning this race or not. Because if we take the average rating for the horses in the race happening today, we're going to get a number. And if that number is less than 50, we know that our horse has got a good chance of being a contender in this race. So using the single rating, we've now given ourselves a huge amount of information about which horse to pick in the race. And I just want to go through everything again. I want to have a recap of what we've looked at so far. So we began by looking at how ratings better bets, okay, and the fact that they use more selections because they've spent the time building their ratings, and then on the day of racing, they just need to run through the rules and find the horses. Then we looked at the major groups that we need to analyze, that we really must use if we're going to find winners. So we must use those 5 main groups. Those are the ones that ideally we want to be rating. Okay? And then we decided we were going to look for a way to rate form. And we achieved rating form by assigning different points based on the finish position that a horse had. So we would assign these points to each of the horse's past race finish positions. And then when we'd done that, we just add them all together to get a total rating for the horse. However, we then realized that we should consider races that happen more recently are more important than races that happened a long time ago. So we wanted to include that within our rating to make it more accurate. And we did that by using a weighting method known as time decay weighting, but which was simply to use a percentage of the rating based on how long ago a race took place. And then we took this to another level and made it even more accurate by using the distance to a winner instead of the finish positions when we rated a horse. So we used how many lengths behind the winner a horse finished instead of the finish positions, and that allowed us to account for a horse that wins by 5 lengths and a horse that wins by half a length. So we get to take into account a horse when it performs better. And then finally, we used the average ratings of all runners in a race to find out what level a horse is likely to be competitive in. Okay, so that tells us straight away which horses. I mean, that information there, that information tells you straight away which runners in a field are likely to have a chance at winning the race. Okay. Now, I'm going to share something with you that I've never shared with anybody before. Okay. It's a complete step-by-step guide to creating ratings that uses the exact same method that I use to create my ratings. And this method has the potential to change your life because using ratings, you can have a profitable betting career. And that is borne out by the fact that most pro punters and successful tipsters are using their own ratings in order to find their selections. Okay, that's how they do it. And I'm going to be giving you the key to unlock the secrets in a complete video course. Inside this course, I'm going to show you how to make sure that a rating is going to be effective from the very beginning of creating it. Okay? And then I'm going to show you how to choose what you should be rating. So you need to know what you should be rating if you're going to rate it. Then I'm going to teach you how to know whether a rating is any good. How do we test our ratings to see if they're performing properly? I'm going to give you the secrets of designing a professional rating and knowing that it's going to work before we spend the time to develop it. And I'm also going to show you why and how you must tweak your ratings if you want to make the most profit. And then we're going to look at how to use these ratings to find winners quickly. Now, I've charged hundreds of pounds an hour in private consultations teaching people how to do this. But for the first time ever, I've recorded this knowledge into over 3 hours of video tutorials. And these have never, ever been released before. And when they do get released, they're going to be £97 to get the course. But as a thank you for joining me today, this evening, you can get the complete video series at a 50% discount. But I can only give that to the first 100 people who come on, because I'm also helping everyone to design their own ratings as well. And as well as that, I'm going to give you the massive bonus of a month's free access to my new racing dossier software. Now, this software is actually not available at the moment, and it's only been available to a private group of people, and it gives you direct access to my own personal database of ratings that I've been developing for the last 10 years. So if you're serious about making money from your betting, then this is your chance to do that. And you can get access now at www.raceratingspro.com. And while you go over there and grab your discount, I'm going to get stuck into some of the questions that you've been asked us throughout this presentation to do with ratings. So let's see if Simon is there and we can start taking some of the questions.
Hi, Michael. Thank you very, very much. That was great. I'm just thinking, wow, a chance to change your betting for that kind of offer. So I really think people should be getting over to raceratingspro.com and getting stuck into that offer, because that won't last. It's fantastic. A hell of a lot of questions and interest, Michael. So I'm going to start throwing a few at you. If I don't get round to people's individual questions, what I'm going to try and do is combine them. And if your question isn't asked, we will get back to you in the next couple of days. So there will all be. Right, question here, Michael. What do you equate to the importance of ground conditions? For example, Lingfield form may not be relevant to Southwell and vice versa. So it's probably a question mainly about the all-weather. And do you think the importance of particular track form affects ratings?
Yes, I do think it affects ratings, but I think it can be overemphasized as well. It's very easy to get bogged down in the minutiae of ratings, and that's something you don't want to do, which is why earlier I suggested that when you start, you use rankings. Ground condition, I think, is one of the most important factors. The going is one of the most important factors. And transferring going from all weather, say, to flat, it doesn't necessarily work. It will work for some horses and not for others. And what I do personally is I actually have a rating that measures the likelihood of that transference. Okay, so what we're doing is we have, say, for example, we have a speed rating on different ground conditions. So we look at the speed ratings over different ground conditions before they've been adjusted for going. And then you say, well, okay, this horse is achieving these speeds on the all-weather and these speeds on the flat. Okay, and we then adjust them for ground conditions, and we see what the difference is. Okay, we see what the difference is between these ratings, and then that indicates to us whether the horse is likely to transfer all-weather performances over to flat. So you can then very quickly look and see, okay, on all weather, it's generally achieving a rating of 55, and on flat, it's achieving a rating of 50. Okay, so the chances are is that's going to be transferable. Whereas if you'll see sometimes a horse maybe is achieving 75 on all weather and 43 on flat. Kind of obviously these figures are just random examples, but you can immediately see that the transference of form there, the transference of speed is likely to not work in the horse's favour from the all weather to flat for that runner. So that's how I approach that subject.
Well, I mean, it's great because what it's bringing out more is that the depth that the ratings go, and there's so many factors that you're bringing in. For instance, I've got a question here. In your view, what factor does a jockey have within a rating system?
That's an excellent question. Now, rating jockeys, as you can probably imagine, it is quite a tough one because in the UK we don't actually have that much information about a horse's connections, which is part of the reason why people get stuck into using this a hot trainer, hot jockey, last week's performance figures. However, again, everything to do with ratings is just to look at it from a slightly different angle. So let's say I think a jockey obviously does have quite a big say in how a horse is run, and I know that you'll agree with that. But
Definitely.
but I use it comparatively less than that in my ratings, and the way I measure that is what we measure is, for example, let's take the jockey and let's see if he has a preference for a horse. So rather than seeing if the jockeys are, riding winners recently, let's actually see if it's ridden this horse before and how has that horse performed. And then we can compare that. We create a rating for the jockey based on his relationship with a horse. And we can do that over specific courses if we want, over specific ground conditions, distances, race time. We can obviously do that however we want. But what we're building there is we're building a profile of the jockey with the horse. And that's one way of looking at it differently. Another way is to use what we call jockey, or you can do this with trainers as well, trainer patterns, jockey and trainer patterns. And that is to look for regular patterns that occur year in, year out with the same jockeys, the same trainers, and they always have a lead in. So we can do this again using ratings because we can rate performances of we are rating performances of certain horses. So we can look at a jockey's horses and see the ratings and say, when is this jockey performing well? And what does that tell us? Because if it tells us that he's performing particularly well at the change of seasons, for example, there's a couple of jockeys who will perform well on the changeover of seasons. We know that, and there's always an indicator as to when that might start happening in your ratings. You'll see that when he starts to ride horses of a certain rating, up getting performances of a certain level out of them in your ratings, then you can see that that's a start of the lead-in to this hot streak pattern that he may be having. And equally, you're going to have the same at the end of the pattern. There'll be an indication when it's starting to lead out of this pattern. And you'll see these patterns occur in performances again and again and again. I mean, they're regular and they're repeatable, and you can jump on board of them.
Great. Just to clarify, guys, if you're thinking about getting over to Race Ratings Pro for this offer, I would get on with it. Basically, we've already sold 20, and they're flying out. So here's one for well, I'm going to ask you it because it's quite an interesting subject. I think you've probably covered it, but how often do you bet personally?
I bet every day.
I kind of knew the answer, which is why I giggled at the end. So I apologise for
that. Yeah, I bet every day. The majority of my betting is fully automated now. It's all database handicapping. It comes out of the database, it goes into a bot, and the bot then bets into the market for me. So I actually don't touch the majority of my bets, but I bet a big I mean, I now bet a large quantity every day, so I couldn't probably I would need a bigger team of people than I've got, that's for sure, to place the bets for me if I was going to be doing it by hand.
Right. I mean, you talked earlier about the kind of the extra betting, the weight of these, and the return on investment. So, I mean, it's a real major operation when you get to the highest level of this, I would imagine.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, at the highest level, you got the betting syndicates, of course, and I mean, for example, the betting syndicates. Well, there's currently 4 or 5 major syndicates in the US, and of course there's syndicates in Australia and Hong Kong, and then there's a couple in the UK as well. Um, and but in the US, the big syndicates, I mean, we're looking at turnovers of kind of like, I mean, in their full offices, with statisticians and artificial intelligence programmers and race readers and all the rest, and of course bettors. And they'll be turning over maybe $500 million a year, so $500 million a year, and they'll be coming away with profits of 100 million or more. I mean,
Wow.
it's at the top end, it's very big business at the top end.
Wow. It's not a bad weekend's work, is it? Anyway,
Yeah.
horses, horses winning or finishing close up are put up in weight by the handicapper for future races. How do your ratings counteract that and take into account extra weight due to success?
Okay, that's an excellent question. Um,
It's a brilliant question, isn't it? Over
yeah.
here.
um, so yeah, as you say, the horses take into account weight. And during the webinar, I was trying to show you how we develop ratings by asking ourselves exactly these sorts of questions. And that's how we can improve ratings or create new ratings as well. Because um, in some situations, you'll find that actually ignoring that increase will make you more profits than taking it into account. And obviously, that's not in all situations by any stretch of the imagination. But in order to take uh, the weight increase into account, um, well, first of all, I'd like to say something about weight. Um, in that you see, a pound or whatever added onto a horse, and like the vast majority of time, small amounts of weight aren't going to make any difference to the horse. Now, you're talking about a big animal here, and it would be like, me picking up a lightweight dumbbell and running, 100 yards with it. Like the extra weight for that distance isn't going to make a huge difference if it's small, the majority of the time. Unless the conditions are extremely different from what it's been racing on, it's a far longer race, or the ground is sloppy, or whatever. Um, but when we want to take it into account, there are a number of ways that we can do this. Now, obviously, one way is if you're using speed ratings, you can actually you create your speed ratings as a weight figure, and then you can adjust your speed ratings for the weight taken in today's race. Um, so that's one way of doing it. Um, Another way of taking into account the weight is, I would also say at this point that um, the official lengths behind the official lengths added on for increases in weight, I've never found to be particularly accurate. Um, so I ignore them completely. Okay,
Mm.
and we take let's look at a different rating as opposed to speed, although speed is normally where weight comes in. But if we're doing a form rating like the one we've done today, we say, okay, so how is the weight going to affect it? And we look at the past ratings, and we say we want to adjust for weight. Okay, and we do that in the simplest format. We can do that by creating weight brackets, similar to the way we created um, lengths behind winner brackets. We had 0 to half a length, and we can do the same with weight, with a few pounds difference in between each range. And we then we have to have a few ratings first for a horse before we can effectively use this. Okay, so we then have a few ratings for a horse, and we look at the ratings and we look at how it performed with these different weights, and that will tell us, or it will start to give us an indication of how the weight is going to affect the horse. And then I usually use a minimum of 5 races before I'll implement this. 5 races with weight before I implement this. Otherwise, there's not really enough data. And then you look at the races, you look at your 5 races, and the horse has got different weights on it. And you've got your rating that's already been adjusted, don't forget, for the other conditions that you want. So you've got your fully adjusted rating in each of these races, and now you haven't adjusted it for weight. So now you're looking at that rating to see how those horses performed in with the different weights, and that will give you a rough measurement for the likelihood of a decreasing or performance based on the amount of pounds that a horse may be carrying. I hope that was clear. That was quite long-winded.
Yeah, no, I think so. Just to bring us up to date, guys, we sold 64 now, and remember, we've only got 100 on at this offer, and you're also getting access to that incredible other bonus, which is the dossier, not a dodgy dossier. This is a good one. So, we need to be quick, guys, and get in on this. I've got a question here about automated betting, which is something I know you use. And somebody's put automated betting is something which kind of frightens them, but they can see the benefits of it. So how do you control that fear, if you like, of automated betting, and how do you handle that emotionally, knowing that you could be kind of miles away and your computer's whirring away putting all these bets on?
Yeah, well, now I have to say that I actually find, or I found that by getting into automated betting, um, it took the emotion completely out of betting for me, because I pretty much stopped watching races because I no longer needed to watch them, because I wasn't interested in seeing how a horse ran anymore, because the ratings are doing that for me. Um, and actually, by having that emotion removed, you can become much more business-like, if you were, with your betting, because it's essentially balancing books. You know that you should be producing this amount every 3 months, and you monitor it on well, obviously it goes into your system, or you put your results in it each day, if you haven't got a way to do that automatically. But then you look at each month and you see, okay, how are we doing? How are we performing? And because you're using ratings, it's very easy to get statistics to say whether you're within the expected variance for those ratings or for that strategy. And when you're not, you can pull something from the portfolio or pause it and leave the others running. So it actually removes the emotion from me, for me. But I think when you start, I think the key to getting started with automated betting is, to be honest, is just to start small and accept the fact that you may be placing, £2 bets, and you may have a £200 bankroll in your automated, whatever account you're using for the bot, and you're placing £2 bets. Okay, you're not gonna get rich placing £2 bets, but
But it will ease your nerve, is what you're saying.
exactly, like you lead in, and like those £2 bets, they'll grow, and you learn that the bot is doing what it should be doing, and you see 99%, probably 99.9% of the time, when you think something's gone wrong with the bot, it actually hasn't. Something's gone wrong with what you've told it to do. So by starting with small bets, if you make a mistake at the beginning with the way you're setting it up, or what you're doing with it, then it's not damaging to your bank, or you go back and you learn from that mistake, and you reset it up again and you start it off, and you maybe lost a fiver, so it's nothing to worry about. And you do that for a few months, and you'll very quickly be very comfortable with it, and be happy to increase your bankroll and your stakes.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think and that's a way of controlling that kind of nerves about it. Right, I'm going to combine a few into one general thing about bookmakers and exchanges. So, how many bookmaker accounts do you have open at once? We don't need an exact figure on that, I wouldn't have thought. And have you had trouble keeping bookmaker accounts open? And how has the exchanges impacted on how you bet?
um, I don't have very many bookmaker accounts anymore because I struggle to keep them open. So I've pretty
Good
much
sign, guys.
I've pretty much given up on bookies these days, and it's getting harder and harder to keep accounts open because of the internet, and they now share um, knowledge, if you will, however you want to phrase it. They share betting patterns with each other, um, and addresses and all the rest of it. So it's harder and harder. The only real way to bet with bookies now is to have teams of runners on a serious level. To have teams of runners. And for me personally, the exchanges are a lifeline because I would much rather have people who work for me managing the automated betting side into the exchanges than having teams of runners around the country that you have to operate and manage. I mean, that's an operation in itself trying to manage, kind of 20 to 30 runners around the country. So, um, the exchanges, in fact, the exchanges were one of the main reasons that I started betting in the UK again, um, coming back from the States. So, because it allows you to kind of automate your betting, because in America you can plug straight into the tote pools with software, similar to how you do with Betfair in the UK.
And of course, in America, the betting is very much track orientated, isn't it? Rather than here where we've got the whole country to go at.
Absolutely, it's very much track to track, and you do have off track betting as well, but it's all most of it goes into the pools at the track. They also have a nice thing which we don't get in the UK, which is rebate. So if you're turning over a decent amount, you can get rebates of 7, 8, even as high as 10% on some bets.
So yeah, just a complete different way of betting. Here's one, Michael. How do you adjust form ratings and your own rating systems to take account of horses that you have evidence and that are known to run well fresh? So they may have had a time off, but they've come back from these periods of being off before and won. Can you take that into account?
Absolutely. I mean, I have to say, you can pretty much take anything into account with ratings. The way I choose to do it personally is I choose to have lots of different ratings, measuring the same thing and then maybe taking different things into account. Because that way I can see which rating is going to work best in which situation. Because you'll always be surprised at how one rating may perform excellently under one set of race conditions, and then under a different set of race conditions, another rating performs excellently. So I prefer, which I mean, I say that's also how most betting syndicates they work. They have a massive amount of factors, and then they reduce them in their model to sets of racing conditions to create an odds line. So they may combine some of them or whatever. But to take account horses that are fresh, what we're talking about now is we're talking about horse specific ratings. And I may actually, I mean, there are ways to do that within other ratings, if that makes sense. So you have your form rating and you want to take that into account. There are ways to do that, but I wouldn't suggest you get into them to start with because they're quite mathematical. So what I would do initially is I would start by creating a rating that measures a horse's preferred rest period. Quite simply like that. So we create a rating that looks at the performance of horses. So we may say we break it down into days, so brackets, days since last race. So we may have 0 to 7 days, and then 7 to 14, and 14 to 30, 30 to 60, however you want to break them down. And for each horse, we would then measure. We create a rating that says, how has this horse performed in, say, the first 2 or maybe 3 races after coming back from a break of each time period. And we can use the same method even as assigning points, like we've just seen this evening. We can assign points based on how it performed in each of those 3 races after coming back in a different time period. We assign the points, and then we create the average of them. And then we're starting to see which time period the horse is performing best in. And again, you can combine that into a single rating, or you just simply use the rating in the relevant time period for the horse. So if a horse has a high rating in 14 days, and you just have a note that this horse has these average figures for the different time periods, and it's coming back from one of them, and we have the horse's average rating overall, for all its races, as we've just seen this evening. So we've rated the races we've seen this evening, and we say, okay, so this horse has got 50 points, but we can see, looking at, if we break its performances down into these time periods, the first 3 races coming back from each time period, the average of those races, we can now see, actually, if it coming back from a 14-day break, it actually it's had an average of coming back from a 14-day break of a rating of around 70. So that suits it. But if it's coming back from a 90-day break, it's getting an average of like 35 in those first 3 races. So clearly it needs a bit of a run in. And then you simply use those 2 ratings in conjunction with each other. You say, well, it's got 50 in today's race, but I can see it always achieves higher when it's come back in the last 14 days. And it's come back in the last 14 days, so I can expect to boost this rating slightly. So what we're doing is we're using that information to boost our current rating.
I think what's coming across, Michael, is the kind of depth, and a lot of the questions we're getting in is, do we take this factor? Do we take that factor? What about this? What about speed? What about what? And I think what's coming through is that anything basically that's involved in horse racing, you can get a rating for.
Absolutely.
I mean, one of the questions is, does Michael feel that breeding is underused or overused? And actually, what I think we're saying is that there's a possibility where you could look at a sire, say Sadler's Wells, and rate its progeny under certain conditions. And that could be a rating in itself.
Absolutely. I mean, essentially, there is a way to rate anything. And we can break anything down into a number. And if we have a number, it's much easier for us as humans to be able to take that number and do something with it. But when we start with ratings, we don't want it to be complicated, and it doesn't have to be complicated either. It can be very simple. So take what we've done this evening. You see that rating we've done this evening. Now, if you did that rating and you looked at all horses and you used the ranking, and as I said earlier, you should always start with the rankings, because it's simply, top rated, second top rated, third top rated. Now, you have that ranking for each horse, and you take a set of races, say, for example, my favourite races, all-weather sprints, ones I bang on about all the time.
We all have our cross to bear, Mike.
So let's say you take a set of races, you take all-weather sprints, you take your rate, the ranks that each horse has achieved in the set of races you're looking at, and you start to see how they perform. And you'll probably be able to say, well, okay, actually, just using the rankings, I can narrow the field down to 4 or 5 runners straight away who are going to win, 50 or 60% of the time. So these runners are going to win 60% of the time on average. Yeah, of course, there'll always be times when another one wins, but I know that these runners who are ranked 1 to 4 or 1 to 5 in my rating are going to win these types of races 60% of the time. So there you go. You've narrowed down a field of 10 horses to 4 or 5 immediately. And then you'd probably be able to find a profitable method just using the rating we've used tonight. So then you say, well, we know that the top 5 ranked, so now we look at the ratings themselves and see what the differences are between them. You know, you should always allow a little bit extra, a little bit less, as I explain inside the course, and there's a reason for that. But then you can see what the differences are and how much better is the top rated than the second top rated. I mean, if it's way better, maybe you want a single bet on it. However, if it's very close, maybe be looking at Dutchy. So it doesn't need to be complicated. And when you're happy using a single rating like that, then you can think, all right, I'm going to add another rating in now. I'm going to create another rating which is going to measure connections. And then you build them up in stages like that. And then you add the connections in. Meantime, you're still making profits from your first rating, but now you're starting to look at races with the connections. So you may start by looking, actually, I know all weather sprints are doing really well with my rating, so I'm going to leave that there. With this new rating, I'm going to start just on a particular set of races for this rating. I'm not going to combine them yet. I'm going to get this rating working in a niche set of races as well. And then when that's working, I'm going to combine them and do that. So it's you take it step by step. It doesn't have to be overly complicated or difficult. And an example of that is I have one rating called the 5278 contender rating. And this, as the name suggests, and I'm sure there's a few people here who are in the private group that have already got access to Racing Dossier, and they'll be using that. And the 5278 contender rating, as the name suggests, it ranks horses, and the top 4 horses win 52 to 78% of the time across all races. So then you can use that to narrow a field down immediately to 4 runners. And of course, as I say, there's always going to be a horse that wins from outside of those top 4, but in the long term, we know it's going to have that strike rate. The winners are going to come from those 4 horses that percentage of the time, and we can build our betting system around that.
That's just great. I mean, and this is the kind of stuff you're going to be getting on the Race Ratings Pro site and the course. Now, as it stands, we've got 69 sales in, so they're going fast. So you really need to get over there. I'm going to ask one more question, Michael, before we close, because if we haven't got round to your question, we'll get round to them in the next couple of days and you'll get answered. But the question's about speed and speed figures. And one of the questions is, why do you think speed ratings and speed figures are so basically badly used or unavailable in this country? And you talked about American racing. Could you tell the difference, or try and explain the difference about speed ratings, say here, how we use them, and how they're almost far more important to the people who bet on American racing?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, the first thing is speed ratings. There are a number of reasons speed ratings are used less in the UK. The first reason is that in the UK we have a lot of foreign horses and we have a lot of race conditions. Different conditions. The tracks are very different. The grounds are very different, and that makes it a lot harder to create speed ratings. And it also makes them a little bit less accurate as well, of course. So that the extra work puts people off. Now, the other thing is that in America there is a huge amount of horse racing data, which we don't get in the UK. The UK is very traditional. Takes a long time to change anything. And for example, in the States, you'll know everything about a horse. You'll know how its training's been going, what its trial runs have been like, whether it's been injured, what the injury was, what the doctor's reports were, what drugs it took. I mean, you know everything. And the same goes for speed. You get your sectional times, which is the time that the horse has achieved at 4 different points. So you know how how fast the horse was running at different segments of the race, and using that information, you can accurately rate pace. For example, you know whether the horse is going to prefer a fast pace or a slow pace, or you know how it's likely to run a race because we're rating it. We're clocking the time at different points in the race. Now, in the UK, we don't have sectional timing. And so, again, along with the complications of using speed ratings, we don't know the different section times of when a horse has run, so it's harder to get pace. Putting sectional timing in is expensive, and there was a company who started doing this called Turf Tracks a number of years back, and they were making the sectional times public at a few tracks where they had the technology, and they were very quickly bought out by a company, and all the sectional times disappeared from public view. And
Wonder who that could have been.
well, exactly. I mean, and I know that a couple of the betting teams in the UK have people at every tracks hand timing horses sectional times, because actually just by having sectional times in the UK, because no one else has it, just by having sectional times in the UK, you can make a profit, because no one else has it, no one else is using it, so you don't actually need anything else except for them to make a profit, a good profit. So yeah, those are the main reasons why. The cost of it, the lack of information, and the fact that it's harder to create a speed rating where you have a variety of ground conditions and horses coming from other countries.
Fascinating stuff, and like you say, it's something that's just so utilized in this country, but hopefully that will change. But thank you, Michael. That's been very illuminating. You've really shone a light on the world of race ratings, and I'm sure that if people get over to raceratingspro.com, they will have the access to the course and will soon become immersed in this fascinating style of betting. So thank you so much for joining us. It's been a fascinating evening, Michael. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Pleasure. And thanks to everyone who's attended tonight's webinar. We hope to be doing one of these again really soon. So from everyone at Betfan, I hope you've enjoyed it and found it helpful. It certainly made me sort of question a few thoughts I had about race ratings, and I thought I knew quite a lot about them. So it's been fascinating, and just on behalf of everyone at Betfan, I hope you all have a really Merry Christmas, and keep reading your newsletters, and we aim to get the best people out there, and we put these events on and to be your #1 stop shop for everything betting related. So thank you very much, everybody, and good night.